Today we are going to be talking about different kinds of equation vocabulary, and we are going to start with the parts of an equation. So we have 4 different parts of an equation that we are going to talk about with our lesson. The first part is a variable, and a variable is a letter that is used to represent one or more numbers in an expression, equation, or inequality. So a variable represents a number that we do not know. So let's use the example 2x plus 6. And in this example, the x is the variable. The x is the letter that represents something that we don't know. So that is 2 times something we don't know plus 6. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is a term. And the terms are the chunks of the problems. So it is a real number, a variable, or a combination of real numbers and variables. So it can be things that are put together. And if we use that same example we have above, we have this first chunk here, the 2x, and then our second chunk is that positive 6. So we have 2 chunks or 2 terms in this expression. The next piece we're going to talk about is the coefficient. And the coefficient is the coworker to the variable. So it is the number that is multiplied by the variable. So it's the number that's stuck out front. So if we go back to that same example, 2x plus 6, the coworker in this problem is the 2. It's the number that's stuck in front of that variable. Now sometimes you'll run into a problem that doesn't have a number in front of the variable. So say we had the problem just x plus 6. Well, we still know that there's 1x there. We can see it. There's just 1. So in this problem, it automatically has a coefficient of 1. So we don't have to write it because we can see it. But if the question asks what is the coefficient is just 1. And then the constant is the lonely number. They're constantly alone. They're sad. They're all by themselves. So it's a term that does not contain a variable. So if we go back to that same example, we have 2x plus 6. The number that's all by itself, that's constantly alone, is that positive 6. So let's practice labeling some parts of the equation, and then I'm going to have you do it on your own. So I'm going to use the word bank down below me. So I'm going to start with the coefficient first. And remember, the coefficient is the coworker to the variable. So it's the number that is in front of the variable. And remember, the signs that are in front always go with it. So this positive 3 right there is the coefficient. Now we need to work with the terms. The terms are the chunks of the problem. There are 3 chunks in this problem. So there's term 1. Here's the second term, the second chunk. So I have plus 3y, so that's a term. And then the third chunk I have is this positive 10 or plus 10. So that's the third term. I have all my terms. Now let's do the variable. The variable is the letter. So the y is a variable, and the x is a variable. And then the last piece is the constant. Constantly alone. He's sad. He's all by himself, is that positive 10. Okay, so that's how you can label an expression or an equation or an inequality. What I want you to do is I want you to pause the video quickly, and I want you to do the bottom one by yourself. And here are your answers. So the 5 is the coefficient or the coworker to the variable. The x is the variable. The 7 is constantly alone. He's all by himself. And then the bottom two pieces, the 5x is a term, and so is that positive 7. So those are your parts of equations and expressions and inequalities. Now let's figure out, how do we know if it's an equation, expression, or inequality? So not only can we determine the parts of a number sentence, we can also determine whether it is either an expression or an equation. So in an expression has no equal sign. So it's a term or combination of terms and operators. So an example of an expression would be just the one that we were working with from our previous page, which would be 2x plus 6. There is no equal sign. Now, in an equation, there is an equal sign. So it's a mathematical sentence stating that two expressions are equal. And if you look at the word equation, you can almost see the word equal in it. So EQUA, all you have to do is add an L, and equation looks like equal. So an example of an equation would be 2x equals 6. So whatever 2 times that mystery number is 6. So let's do the bottom section, or that middle section, I'm sorry. Circle if a problem is an expression or equation. Let's do 2 together. So we're going to start with the first one. I see right here that this problem has an equal sign. That is a dead giveaway that this is an equation. Now if I look at the next one, number 6, I'm just going to go across. There is no equal sign. So that tells me this one is an expression. So I want you to pause. I want you to do 2 through 5 and then 7 through 10, and then you can unpause to check your work. And here are your answers for those. And you can see in all the ones where I circled they were an equation, I circled that they had an equal sign. So anytime there's an equation in a problem, or I'm sorry, anytime there's an equal sign in a problem, it is an equation. And anytime there is no equal sign, it is an expression. So next thing I want you to do is I want you to pause. I want you to practice labeling again. Now this one, because it has an equal sign right here, this is an equation. So I want you to label the parts of the equation for me. And here are your answers to that. Make sure you always take the sign in front. So this is a -9. So it all together has to come together. And it's also a constant. So it's a term and a constant. Same thing with 14. It is a constant and a term. And 15 is a coefficient because it's the coworker to the variable.